Hello, my name is Anthony Chidiac. I'm a teacher at Patrician Brothers College Fairfield, and today I'll present you a talk on HSC English. HSC English is different to the other examinations that you'll encounter. It covers three particular areas. It could be English Studies, English Standard, and English Advanced. Today, I will focus more on paper one. However, I will talk about aspects of paper two. We'll be covering text and human experience. It's a common module to advanced and standard courses and some students in the English Studies course. So it is an important foundational unit. So there's a crossover there between those three subjects. So all people have to do elements of this particular examination. Paper two is different for all these other subject levels in English. So what does this module contain? Well, it's important to realize that it's a very logical module when it comes to English. They have to choose a module that they've got enough ideas in that all books can extract something from this module in some form or shape. So human experiences is really about human beings, and English, if you like, is about text. Text tells stories, communicate information about human beings and their human experiences. So whether it's about tragedy, comedy, love, resilience, perseverance, all these things are human experiences that work in English. They work very well. So it's a very broad heading. So let's look at human experiences. They can involve the individual, or they can also involve the group. They can be common to people from different places and times, or they can be very different. That is why within this there can be a paradox. We see ourselves as separate human beings, and yet we identify as human beings. So we want to be separate, but we also want to be part of the group. We talk about universal human experiences, things that unite us and bring us together. Yet we can also reject this idea when we celebrate the achievements of individuals. We celebrate these achievements through stories and the texts we share. Texts are a vehicle to represent human experiences through language, which is why we need to be able to find the language features. And this makes sense. Storytelling, which has been part of human nature for thousands of years, is expressed and later on was written down. And this is what we have today in English. To understand how the meaning of humanity and human experiences is conveyed or represented, this is what texts do. The module says that you, the students, need to make increasingly informed judgments about how aspects of these texts, for example, context, purpose, structure, stylistic and grammatical features, and form, shape meaning. So, put simply, the text itself and the features within the text bring about a certain meaning. You need to understand the text to be able to talk about the ways or parts of that text that work together to capture our human experiences. Does it work? Yes, it does. but are we looking for the right things within the text to extract this information? So most of us will read a text, we'll know the storyline, but we need to go much deeper into that text to get a holistic understanding of that text. Once again, texts are where we find these paradoxical ideas captured, with some texts celebrating individuality and others saying it's better to be united. We are a team. Now, when we study texts in this module, we look for what the text is saying about humanity. What does the text value? Is it the individual or the collective experiences? Is it a group of individuals that come together? How do our experiences affect us emotionally? What impact do they have on us? What human quality do we find in a text? Now, I said before, we do find plenty of human qualities in a text. If we do not find a human quality in a text, it's probably not a text or not a text of quality. Some further questions that we need to consider. Now, these questions are important because the more we look at them, the more we start extracting the deeper levels of the text. We explore them. What motivates a person? We also need to ask, how does the composer use language to convey this meaning? How does the style, structure, and grammar of the text speak to us about human experiences? What is the composer's purpose in telling us this story in the context in which it is produced and consumed? Produced refers to when it was composed, put together by the artist or composer, and consumed refers to when it is being read. How do we take that text in? What do we get from that particular text? Let's do this activity now, and just to help us explore some of these ideas. List 5 beliefs about humans that you think everyone believes in. They're universal ideas or principles. And the second one, write a belief you have about humans that may not be common to everyone. So I'll give you a few minutes to ponder these questions and these activities. And you can use your book or your prescribed text to help you. All right, let's look at related texts. Now, in the past, related texts were a big part of these examinations. Well, now they're not. It doesn't mean we don't need related texts, but we don't need them as we did before. They will be used for your assessments in class, but you will not need a related text in the HSC examination. Now, the good thing about that is you don't have to memorize all these extra texts. The bad thing is you could be studying a related text in class that you won't be doing for the HSC. But the related texts will be useful when you do the craft of writing, which is Module C of that exam, where you have to draw upon your wider reading to compose your response to this question, whether you're doing standard, advanced, or English studies. The outcomes criteria. Now, when we come across this, we have to say, well, why are we worried about the outcomes? Well, the answer is we need outcomes because outcomes are what they use to put the exam together, to put the syllabus together, and finally to mark us as students. So if we understand the outcomes very, very well, it means we can give the outcomes what they're asking of us. That means we're on the same page as the examiners and we have that insight already. So we could be writing a lot of things in our answer that are basically missing the target. They're missing the outcomes. So we need to understand them. Let's have a look at these outcomes for texts and human experiences. All right, there's three of them. It's to demonstrate understanding of human experiences in texts. So each question needs to consider the idea about human experiences. So it has to be about human experiences. If it's not about human experiences, then and you write about something else, then you're missing the target of that particular question. The second one is analyse, explain, and assess the ways human experience is represented in a variety of texts. So each question needs to consider the text itself. You need to delve into the text and look at how does the text explain things? What sort of evidence does it put forward to explain this idea about human experience? And you need to analyse that text and look at the effect of it and how it helps to draw out that idea. The last one is organise, develop, and express ideas using language appropriate to the audience, purpose, and context. So each question needs to consider the actual writing itself. Your writing, you have to express yourself. How well do you write as a person? You might hit the human experiences, you might be able to have the text, but you might be a very poor writer. And that will separate you from the other students, the more capable students. These things are often written on the rubric. They're there. So you might say, they're not really asking me to do that, but they are. You need to know them well. They're not there as decoration. They're there to say to you, this is what we've based our exam on. We're looking for these things. Can you please produce these in your answer? And this is what we are looking as our marking criteria. So let's go through them again. We have to understand human experiences. We have to show an understanding of that. We have to use evidence from within the text, and we have to analyze that evidence. And thirdly, we have to be good writers. We have to work on our writing skills, our ability to express ourselves to be successful in this subject of English. Let's look at the exam structure. We need to be familiar with this exam structure. It has changed from previous years. This is the second year of this new syllabus course, and we need to be aware of it so that we can focus our attention and our efforts in excelling in this exam. So the first thing is paper 1 is about text and human experiences, and it's made up of 2 sections. Section 1 is 45 minutes. Section 2 is 45 minutes, and each section is made up of 20 marks, so the total marks for this section is 40. if in the past it was worth 45 and it was made up of 3 sections. So the creative writing is taken out of this section and it has been placed in an area in paper 2 called the module C, craft of writing. So if we look at it carefully, the first part is short answers. That hasn't changed. Reading of unseen passages. We don't know what they are. The more we read, the more we understand passages and the better we are at answering them. They're unseen passages and they require us to write short answers. Now it's different for each course with some questions crossing over between standard, advanced and English studies. Section 2 is the prescribed text response, which every person will in each school will be doing a different prescribed text. Extended response, usually an essay on your prescribed class text. The same questions will be there for all courses. In that last question, it's a generic question which will allow you to talk about your own text. Paper 2, which I'll cover some parts of today just to give you an overview of it. Now, this is made up of 3 parts and is worth 60 marks and they require you to do it in 2 hours. So each essay, if you like, or extended response, and there are 3, Module A, Module B, Module C, each part you are to allocate about 40 minutes and that gives you 2 hours. In standard English, it's called, the first part, Module A, is called Language, Identity and Culture. And for advanced, it's called Textual Conversations, where you need to compare 2 texts, an original text and maybe a modern day version of that, and look at how they interpret a certain theme and give it more relevancy to today's world. Module B is a close study of a text for standard students, but it's a critical study of a text for the advanced students, where they look at distinctive features of that text that help to make that text so special. And Module C is the craft of writing, where it could be imaginative, it could be a narrative, a short story, a persuasive text, a discursive text. It could be an extended response type essay. And it could be 1 section or it could be made up of two sections where there's a response and there's a reflection on that response. So that's the tricky one. That's the one from left field that they've put in there to get people to think on their feet. So they can't prepare that much for an answer. And they will require wide reading to do well in that particular question. So let's look at the similarities across the papers. Some questions will be common between different courses, and we know that. English study students may have 1 or 2 questions in common with English Standard. English Standard students may also have 1 to 2 questions in common with English Advanced. But all the courses will have 1 or more questions just for their own particular course, so that the papers will look very different. So you might get the paper and say, this looks exactly the same, but towards the end, they might have a different question. Maybe the first 3 questions are similar, then the last 1 or 2 are different. Now, the short answer section has 4 to 5 questions, depending on which course you're doing. And they're worth from 1 to 7 marks with a total tally of 20 marks. The short answer questions. Text and human experiences. All right. So this section we know that will contain, will contain either 4 or 5 short answer questions, which will relate to a series of unseen texts related to text and human experiences. It could be visual. It could be a fictional text or a non-fictional text. It could be poetry, a media article, a website, advertisement, poster, extract from a longer text, such as a novel or play. So what I say to students is, even though you don't see the text, it's your job to brainstorm all the texts that you are familiar with. And there would be 15 to 20 different text types. And I would say, write down in general what the features of these texts are. And some of the more common techniques in those texts. Study them, know them well. Because when you come to one of these texts again in the exam, you'll be able to respond to it. You'll have this background knowledge, this insight already. So get that, put that together, and you'll see a big difference in your answers where you're not thinking on the spot. And thinking on the spot is good if you've got that knowledge to draw on, because that'll save you a lot of time. If you're thinking and you're struggling, you'd be surprised how much time you lose in doing that. This section has a separate reading booklet. The reading booklet will contain extracts and short texts drawn from a range of text types. So sometimes you'll get this booklet and it's got a colour picture in it. Well, most often when we do English, we always say it's a written text. And that's the way we think. But there are some texts that are visual. So the question I ask is, are you familiar with visual techniques such as layout, such as vectors, salience, all these things that don't always come to mind when we see a visual text, because we're so often have in our mind the idea of a written text. Marks will add up to 20, with questions worth from 1 to 7 marks each. We've said that the marks are a guide as to how much time to spend on each question. So if they're worth 1 mark, well, we won't spend too much time on that particular question. If it's worth 5 marks, then we will spend a bit more time, because that section has 45 marks to it. So if it's worth 5 marks, we might spend 10 minutes on that particular question. So we have to work out a way of working through that system. So the way I look at it, it's 20 marks. If it's 20 marks and we have 45 minutes, each question is worth 1 mark. So we should be spending about 2 minutes per 1 mark question. And that's a rough guide. Questions may start with directions such as identify, describe, analyze, explain, or compare. And they're listed from the easiest to the less easiest questions. So you need to know what identify means. That seems like a low order type question. As opposed to analyze, which requires more detailed description. While questions may focus on a single text, you may also be required to compare more than one text in response to a longer short answer question, if that makes sense. That means synthesis, bringing ideas together from different texts. Short answer questions. The questions may start off with the word how. Now that means it has to be language analysis. How means how do they do it? What tools have they used? What techniques have they used? The questions will use words from the module description like paradoxes, anomalies, inconsistencies, representation, or storytelling. So know what every word in the module description means and how it applies to particular texts. So they're words that aren't easy because what they do is they cover complexities. They often cover two or three things, and they're two or three things that have to be weighed up to come about with a response. And that's not an easy type of question. So look at those. Look at some ideas about human experiences and have them ready. Have them at your fingertips. The questions may focus on a specific aspect of human experience, such as arriving in a new place, communication, shared or individual experiences, family memories, relationship with the land, loss and hope, relationships, values, creativity, and so on. You will need to work on developing your ability to locate the relevant ideas in the text and identify the features of language, whether it's visual, spoken, or written, that led to this particular understanding. The key ideas for short answers or questions. So these are some of the questions that you need to think of and have at the back of your mind. How do texts explore individual and or collective experiences? So it's no use going to an exam and saying, well, I'll just go there and I don't have to study for the unseen because I'll go there and just see what they ask me to do. Now, you can't do that. It's better to go there with an understanding, or if you like, a prediction of the questions. So what constitutes an experience, for example? You need to know that. Is every event an experience? Does experience have to involve a change or process? Can the term experience simply refer to a key moment? Do we constantly have experiences, or does experience have to be formative or memorable? What quality of emotions are explored within the text? How does storytelling help us to understand different lives and cultures? So storytelling is important. Human experiences are important. And these are some of the questions that we're getting, and we need to look at a couple of past papers and understand them and let us go through them and prepare ourselves for this examination. Techniques for short answers. I want you to think about some techniques for short answers, and then I'll continue with the next part of the talk.